Hey everybody, I'm super excited for Mythic Plus to get going here in Dragonflight Season 1, so in this video, I wanted to give you guys all the tips I could, having done tons of keys during the beta, so you can go into Season 1 ready to time some keys. A lot of these tips are going to be for all roles, but a number of them will be for healer-specific things as well. Let's start with the affixes. Week 1 is going to be Fortified, Raging, Quaking, Thundering, which I'd say is a pretty favorable week right out of the gate. However, even though we usually like to see Fortified, there's some pretty rough trash mobs in Dragonflight and definitely a good amount of trash mechanics to consider, so I'd highly recommend getting yourself a set of dungeon weakauras. I'll leave mine in the description below. Things like DVM and Bigwigs are great for bosses but are oftentimes less effective on trash, so I like to supplement them with these. My guess is that 2 weeks of Mythic Zeros have made people reasonably familiar with what the bosses do, but probably less familiar with trash mechanics, since trash dies so fast in M0 and missing kicks isn't usually lethal. I'd also recommend finding guides for individual dungeons so you know the major pain points, particularly what casts need to be interrupted, so you can save your kick and CC for the big stuff, especially if you're pugging. A Quaking Timer is also a super useful tool to keep yourself from getting locked out of an important cast, so I'll leave one in the description below as well. With Fortified Raging, be prepared to help your tank out toward the end of pulls with either big heals, damage reductions, CC, or a soothe if you've got one. Some fortified mobs will be extremely lethal when they go into raging mode, so make sure you're running with a soothe of some sort, whether it's coming from you or someone else. If you haven't had a chance to play Thundering yet, here's a quick rundown of how it works. Everyone in the group gets either a positive or negative charge debuff floating over their head. While it's active, you gain 15% damage and healing. If it expires, however, you get stunned and take a bunch of damage, which is really bad. To negate this, you need to run over and touch the person with the opposite debuff as you. Since there's 5 people in a group, one person will be unable to remove their debuff, but it will fall off of them harmlessly. It might take a little getting used to, but most of the time Thundering isn't too bad. It mainly gets bad when it's mixed with other trash or boss mechanics, leading to tough decisions in the moment. I'd recommend getting a nice big Thundering weakaura and sticking it in the middle of your screen while you get used to the affix. I'll leave mine in the description below, which has a countdown of how much time you have left and a clear image of the type of debuff you've got. It will also help you avoid the cardinal sin of Thundering, which is just forgetting about it altogether. It's worth noting that based on timing, Quaking and Thundering could have some nasty interactions with each other. Thundering is sort of like Quaking's big brother after all. If you know a potential Quaking proc is coming in the near future, it might be worth clearing your Thundering buff a little bit earlier, rather than have to face a decision between bashing each other with Quaking or getting stunned by Thundering. Okay, so you're all set with affixes, but how about the dungeons themselves? One thing I'd say you should probably prepare yourself for is a higher amount of healing than you're used to doing. Remember that healing was nerfed by 40% across the board toward the end of the beta, not to mention a 10% nerf to all tanks recently as well. There's a lot of unavoidable damage going out in Dragonflight dungeons, particularly in the way of very bursty AoE. I know I say this in pretty much every video, but be prepared to make liberal use of your cooldowns. Expect to have used them all by the end of every boss fight. If you're not comfortable with the dungeon yet, don't go too ham trying to do healer DPS if it's going to keep you from being able to keep your group alive. For most players, that style of play is better saved for a little bit further down the road in the season. Just learn to crawl before you can run, and make sure you know how to keep your group alive on every encounter before you start trying to out DPS the hunters. I think it's also worth mentioning that running a more conservative build that includes defensiveness and CC is a good idea if your spec allows for that kind of flexibility. Running a greedy DPS-oriented build might be asking for trouble if you don't trust your group to stop dangerous abilities, and if you're pugging, don't trust your group to stop dangerous abilities week 1. My next tip is to communicate. I know it's 2022 and typing in chat to your pug teammates is not cool anymore, but if there was ever a time to do it, it's now. If you know something about an upcoming tough trash pull or a boss, it's probably a good idea to make it known to your group, even if it's just something like kick flame dance or focus the dragon or something like that. There's a really good chance that your group mates have literally no clue what they're supposed to be doing, so quick tips like that can be incredibly helpful in the difference between success and a wipe. I remember that when I played with a tank in the very beginning of Shadowlands who had made a chat macro that summarized every boss in paragraph form, and he'd hit the macro right before every encounter. That might be taking this idea to the extreme, but it was honestly quite helpful in keeping the group on the same page with strategy and key mechanics. If you've got any knowledge about an encounter of any kind, there's no better time to share it than now. This tip goes out to my pugging friends, but do your own key as much as possible and try to spread your score around. Competition for groups is going to be fierce as everyone enters the season with pretty similar gear and no dungeon score. Put yourself in the driver's seat, get your own key, and grind it up if pugging is the route you're going. This way you can be the one choosing who to invite. Chances are you'll get a much higher highest key on the week this way, as other people are likely to take their keys back to their friends or their guild at a certain point. In addition to that, if your key is giving you a lot of repeat dungeons, you're going to want to make sure that you get at least some score from every dungeon this week, if possible. Dungeon score is the sum of your highest score in every dungeon, so you're doing yourself a big disservice if you have a big fat 0 in one of the 8 dungeons. Even completing a dungeon on a relatively low key will up your dungeon score significantly in the beginning of a season, so take advantage of that and spread your time across all the dungeons if you can. This one's a little bit odd, I'll admit, but my next tip is actually to temper your expectations for week 1 a bit. On beta we were scaled to 397 and doing 15 keys was actually quite a challenge. We're not starting anywhere close to that item level this week, and while I'm sure there will be some really high-end groups doing some impressive keys, my guess is that the average player may be capping out in the 10 range. It's a long season, guys, and in the end it will be where you end up that matters, not where you start. You're going to be playing with people who have only done the dungeons on Mythic 0, or in the case of returning older dungeons, maybe for the first time entirely, and they're going to make mistakes. You're going to wipe. Be patient and help people learn, and on the flip side, ask questions if you honestly don't understand something, or go look it up. Don't be too quick to flame people who make mistakes or are doing routes maybe you don't agree with. Dragonflight seems to have breathed some positive new life into WoW, so let's not drag it down with toxicity. This might sound like a bit of an obvious one, but come prepared with the right consumables. There's been some changes to flasks and potions, so go look up what's best for your particular spec and stock up. Go find out what the best enchants and gems are for your week 1 and 2 gear. Stock up on the right stat food. Don't be the healer who forgets to pick up water for regenning mana, also known as me. Individual consumables might not seem like a big deal, but when you combine all the stats and benefits gained from files, food, potions, gems, and enchants, it actually makes a huge difference. So don't be the guy who goes into M+ with empty sockets and no enchants. Some of this stuff is a little pricey at the moment, but there usually is a cheaper option you can go with, and also enchanting a piece of gear is usually a 100% effective way to be sure that you'll get an item level upgrade in that slot. Pro tip. Speaking of pugs not stopping dangerous casts, if you do find someone who seems like they got their head screwed on straight and you enjoy playing with them, the beginning of an expansion is a great time to start networking, adding people to your friends list to maybe get a static group going or at least fill as many slots with people that you trust as you can. Hope you guys are as excited to get into some Dragonflight keys as I am, and I wish you all the best. If you think I forgot anything important, let me know in the comments section, and as always, if you made it this far, please thumb up the video and subscribe to see more of my content. You can also catch me live right here on YouTube, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday at 9 p.m. Pacific, where we do lots of keys and other fun stuff. Hope to see you there. Good luck with those keys, guys, and happy healing.